And welcome back to Sports Talk. Today I'm going to do a preview of UFC 253, Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa, coming from Fight Island in Abu Dhabi. For a pay-per-view card, all in all, it's pretty weak compared to the fight night that we had last week with Colby and Tyrone, which was pretty deep. It's a lot of pushing to pay for this one, to buy it. But with Israel Adesanya headlining it, I guess the UFC is just banking on his stardom to get people to buy it. The main event is looking pretty interesting. When I first saw this fight came up, I didn't think it would be much of a challenge for Israel Adesanya, considering he's a really good counter-striker. That's where he makes his bread and butter, counter-striking. We saw that in the Robert Whittaker fight. We saw that in the Robert Whittaker fight. We also saw that in the Brad Tavares fight. The Derek Brunson fight. He is very good at counter-striking. Yoel Romero didn't come forward, so I didn't really give him a chance to show that in his last fight. But we all know that Paulo Costa comes forward. He's going to hunt Israel Adesanya down all night, which I originally thought was going to play into Israel's hands and would be kind of the end of him. But the more I've watched Israel's fights and watched Paulo Costa's fights, it reminds me a lot of the Kelvin Gastelum fight. Kelvin Gastelum does have similar pressure. A little bit smaller, not as physically imposing as Paulo Costa, but he does have good boxing and he does hunt him down. And he did get pretty close to finishing Israel. It made Israel... That was the toughest fight Israel Adesanya's had so far, was the Kelvin Gastelum fight. And I'm kind of thinking that Paulo Costa might have similar luck, if not maybe a bit better. He is bigger. I think his chin may be a little bit stronger than Kelvin Gastelum's, so it may allow him to do that for longer and won't have to fade in the fifth round like Kevin did. So yeah, it's going to be a really interesting fight actually. As you can see up here, we've got Paulo Costa's record up, which is undefeated, but it's a pretty weak record to be fighting for a title. His biggest win, obviously over Yoel Romero, which wasn't by any means convincing. A lot of people had Yoel Romero winning. I still think Paulo Costa won that fight, but I think it was awfully close. Paulo Costa, then he had his next biggest win, probably over Uriah Hall, which Uriah Hall never really lived up to his billing after coming off the Ultimate Fighter. I think Uriah Hall dropped him in the first round. I'm pretty sure. So we saw Paulo Costa go through a little bit of conversion. Go through a little bit of damage. A little bit of damage. Yeah, I don't know how to say that. But so that shows that he has a little bit of resilience and he can come back. The Johnny Hendricks fight, that's Johnny Hendricks well past his prime, well past his title fighting time. Maybe off the steroids as well, which doesn't help his case. And then the first two fights, relatively unknown fighters, kind of warm-up fights. The UFC have been trying to build him for a while. So with this weak record, we haven't really seen him go up against stiff competition that Israel's going to approach. He hasn't fought a counter-striker like Israel. Hasn't fought a striker like Israel. Many people think because of his figure that he's quite small, but he's 6'4". He's a big dude. A lot of reach. That he can hide behind the jab, quick hands, mix it up with some kicks. Takedown defense is strong. It's going to be a good fight. Definitely the record, Paulo Costa's previous fights is a bit of a worry. He hasn't really fought anyone yet. His style will give him a chance in this fight, I think. Because you can always catch someone if you're chasing them down on the fight. It looks good in the judges' eyes, and also it's a lot of pressure on Israel. Luckily, it's in the big cage at Fight Island. If this was in Vegas, I think I would actually be betting on Paulo Costa if this was in Vegas. With that smaller cage and his fighting style, I actually would have probably lent towards him a bit more. But Israel Adesanya is paying $1.40, $1.50, not much value at all, really. He's a pretty short price favourite for two undefeated fighters. First time in a long time that a UFC title is being contended against two undefeated fighters. Let's have a look at Israel Adesanya's record, which has a little bit more to it than has a little bit more to it than Paulo Costa's record. So as we look at it, obviously had the Yoel Romero fight, which was a bit of a snooze fest. Yoel Romero didn't really do anything, didn't really give him anything to go with. Before that, he had the Kevin Gastelum fight, one of my favourite fights I've ever seen. It was back and forth, knockdown, submissions. It had everything he wanted, and he got the finish in the end. Obviously, when he won the title, unified it against Robert Whittaker in Australia. He outclassed Robert Whittaker on that day, and we all know how good Robert Whittaker is. He rebounded with that really good win over Till. So Israel's record's definitely got a bit more substance to it than Paulo Costa's. Obviously, the Anderson Silva fight, that's Anderson Silva well past his prime. Derek Brunson fight is looking a lot better now with Derek Brunson's recent victory over the young up-and-comer out of Ronda Rousey's camp, Edmund Shabazian. So that fight's looking a lot better now that we look back at it. At the time, it was more of a give-me fight. It's a bit of a test, but more of a give-me fight. The Brad Tavares fight was his coming out party, really. After having a split decision against Vittori before that, he really needed to go up in another level, and he did in that Brad Tavares fight, who's a tough customer, getting it done, unanimous decision. The one thing with Israel is he constantly gets better fight to fight. He's had massive jumps from fight to fight, getting better. And the Yoel Romero fight, we didn't see much improvement, but then again, I think it's a bit of an outlier. He just didn't get a chance to show anything in that fight. So if he's going to improve off that Robert Whittaker fight, Paulo might be in trouble, because he was basically flawless in that Robert Whittaker fight. Big pressure, comes out breakdancing, a lot of pressure. So yeah, it's gonna be a good fight. I think I've talked myself into it. The more that I've thought about this fight, I'm getting more excited about it. Two contrasting styles that meld together well, should produce a really good fight. Any fight Paulo Costa's in is going to be a good fight, because he's going to make it a good fight. I still think Israel Adesanya is going to get the win. I don't think he's going to get the stoppage. I just don't think I think Paulo Costa's chin is good. So yeah, I think it's going to be unanimous decision to Israel Adesanya, but it's going to be a good fight. It's going to be exciting. In the co-main event, we have Dominic Reyes versus Jan Blockovitz. So looking here at Jan Blockovitz's record, it's definitely it's an extensive record, 26-8. It's a lot of fights. His last 3 fights, impressive knockout punch over Corey Anderson, who was looking good, sent Corey Anderson back into Bellator. Jacare Souza coming up in weight. That was interesting. That was a good win. Everyone expected Jacare Souza to do a little better coming up. Luke Rockhold especially, everyone thought he was going to do really well at light heavyweight coming up from middleweight. But Jan put his lights out. Whether that's more of a Rockhold's chin than Jan's power is a debate that definitely needs to be had. But the knockout of Corey Anderson, revenging his loss, it looks good. His only recent loss is to Thiago Santos, who that's no shame in losing to Thiago Santos. He's a great fighter, great knockout power. We saw him really test John Jones for 5 rounds. Did his knee in the 2nd round and still made it close going into the 5th. And some people gave him that fight. Looking back on it, I still think John Jones got the W. Impressive fight against Jimmy Manoa. So yeah, he's got some impressive fights under his belt. But some part of me is just really leaning towards Dominic Reyes in this fight. Obviously, Dominic Reyes, everyone thought beat John Jones in his last fight. And getting in the ring with getting in the octagon with someone like John Jones, I think is only gonna improve. He's only going to prove what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And you might get the rub of being in there with John Jones, who is arguably the greatest of all time. Before that, he beat Chris Weidman, Volkanovski Ozdemir, previous title challenger. Oven St. Preux has also challenged for the title. Jared Cannonier, quality as well. So he's had some really good fights lately, and he's managed to be the better fighter in all those. So this fight, I think he's going to get the W. Again, betting-wise, he's a very short price favourite for this fight. I wouldn't count out Jan. He's tough. He's got that. He's pretty well rounded. Wrestling's alright. His striking's good. He's got a lot of knockouts lately. Rockhold, Corey Anderson. Personally, I'd like to see Jan win. I think someone, not a journeyman, but someone who puts the grind in, puts his head down, represents the sport well. It would be good to see him get the victory, but I think Dominic Reyes' hands are going to be a little bit too quick. If he can improve his stamina, he did fade a little bit in the last 2 rounds against John Jones. If he can work on that and come back as a better fighter, I think he could get the title this time. Other than that, the rest of the fights on the card aren't great, aren't too interesting. It's mainly the 2 co-mains, the co-main and the main event, the title fights. Let me know in the comments who you think's going to win. With my tipping lately, probably go against whatever I said because I haven't been getting them very right. But yeah, I've got Israel Adesanya unanimous decision. Dominic Reyes might risk it. I think Dominic Reyes 3rd round TKO. I think he's the better fighter. The light heavyweight division's looking a bit rough. Without John Jones, there's not much interest in that division. But yeah, I think Dominic Reyes gets the W. Israel Adesanya gets the W. Going to be a good fight. But other than that, yeah. Enjoy the card. Leave your comments who you think's going to win. Like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you guys later.